Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video discussing the 8th dev diary for Age of Wonders 4. This one was covering cities and expansions, which is a topic I've been really excited to hear more about. And I was really happy to read that Glenn was one of the people who worked a lot on this mechanic. Glenn was somebody that I actually met at a random Paradox event years ago. And back when I met him, he was an intern working at Triumph, working on the sector system for Age of Wonders Planetfall. And it's really cool to see that he's getting to work on these kind of systems in Age of Wonders 4. Um, the first thing that is actually discussed in this dev diary is the general income that you can get from a city. This city right here has to be a capital because it's making 50 imperium. I mean, I guess it theoretically could be another city, but that seems like a lot of imperium for just some city to be making, especially when you look at the benefits that a wizard tower gives you further down in the dev diary. I think like each level gives you +5, so going up to +50 has to be from something like a wizard's tower. Maybe you can get +10 from a location, and if you get 5 of those around a secondary city, then maybe you can get that much income. But the rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. Food allows you to get more pops. Once you cross a certain threshold, you get another pop. Production is used to build structures inside the city. Draft is used to make units. Gold is used to buy city structures and units, and a few other things like diplomacy. I mean, most things can be traded in the diplomatic menu. I don't think you can trade food very easily, um, but you can definitely trade mana and gold and who knows, maybe some other things in Age of Wonders 4 that I'm not aware of. Knowledge is, how you unlock new texts from your tomes and a couple other things, I think. Maybe some things they haven't uncovered quite yet. Imperium is kind of like influence in Age of Wonders Planetfall. It's used for unlocking empire skills and acquiring new cities, but can also be used in diplomacy to like declare how you feel about another empire. That can give you claims against somebody. If you say this person did something bad, then um, that can make it so that when you go to war, you get more modifiers that benefit your units in combat. It's interesting here that it looks like it costs 60 Imperium to attract more people to that city, um, which I think would instantly grow a pop. It looks like maybe you're going to get a population in 4 turns without spending that Imperium, so that's a nice little Easter egg for them to include there. Instead of just sharing food, you can say, move here now. um, there's a lot of detail here in city structures. This is going through your different options that you have when you're building up your city development to get those resources at a more efficient rate. The first tier is going to be not bad, and then second tier is better, third tier is going to be better, and then fourth tier is going to be better than that. But the cost to get there is going to be increasing too, so it's kind of like a cost benefit thing. Is it better to get a bunch of lower tier things or just focus towards one thing? A lot of these buildings have requirements that you need to meet in order to build them, and some of them have these things called boosts where if you meet them you get like minus 30% of the cost. Like instead of 100 gold it would go to 70 gold, or 100 production would go to 70 production, and so on and so forth. um, but yeah, it looks like the last tier is mutually exclusive. You can only have one of these tier 4 guilds in each of your cities, so you need to pick one of those to eventually put in each of your cities if you want your cities to be as effective as possible, to be as optimal as possible. All of them are going to cost some gold and production, and now ultimately decide how long it takes to build the city. There's some things in here about foresters and quarries and farms. Those are the boosts, and those are other provinces. So building those will make it easier to build other things, as long as you build them in the right order. So there's like certain chains you want to go down, and that's something that I'm really excited to look more into once I get my hands on the game and get to play around with these systems and how they all rely on each other. The next picture we have here is talking about some of the benefits you get from upgrading your town hall and some of your defenses. A lot of these defenses will increase your siege health, which I was pretty confused by at first, but then it says down here that siege health basically determines how long it'll take for enemies to siege down the city before they can attack it. So 30 health might be like, oh, if they do 5 damage a turn, it's going to take them 6 turns to start a battle. But if they do 10, then it's only going to take 3 turns to get there. But if you wanted to, you could build a caltrop stash on top of your palisade walls, making it 35 health, meaning if they were making 10, it would take them, I think, 4 turns to get there. It wouldn't round down to 3 turns. I think it would round up to 4 turns. Caltrop stash has to be like a thing that just is all across the floor on the map, so that when things pass through certain hexes, they take damage. Something tells me that those will be that'll be like public knowledge. Everybody will see the caltrops. They won't be like hidden from the enemy player who's having to cross the caltrops. That's how it worked with some of the bombs in Age of Wonders, Planetfall, or some of the operations you could cast. It would like put mines or something across the map. Archer Quiver battlements will give you extra health, but I think it will also give you some archer units that you can use in the fight. There was something mentioned at some point about bastions being added to a fight. I think that's like an industrious specific battlements. We have the arcane amplifier battlements, which probably also give you some casting points. Stone walls, they give you a lot of siege health, but I think they also make it so melee can't get to your ranged as easily, and you can just sit your range on a wall. Uh, if I remember correctly, in Age of Wonders 3, having ranged units sitting on walls was amazing. It was like having 3 or 4 melee units at the beginning of a fight, because they can just do damage for a couple turns without anybody getting to retaliate. Um, the ballista tower would be, I think, it's like it's that thing that shoots out a giant. It looks like an arrow, or it looks like a giant crossbow. And the catapult tower is similar, but for whatever reason, it gives more HP. Um, maybe you've no, it's just this one catapult tower. I'm not sure why a catapult would be scarier than a basilisk tower, but it seems like that's the way they've structured things here. Beacon of Valor sounds to me like it might be a bit like the Oathbound turrets in Age of Wonders Planetfall that would heal your units at the beginning of every turn. If they had a little bit of health missing and they were within range, they could get some health back. That's great. If you have units that aren't damaged, but a lot of people will focus down your units so that if a unit does take damage, it probably will die that turn. But with the way figures work, that may not be as big of a thing. Uh, then again, if you're able to heal easily, I don't know, you probably will. People will still want to focus down your units. Bathhouse gives extra experience. That seems pretty good, but it also has a lot of requirements, which makes me feel like it's going to have a lot of costs. And it's a cost benefit thing. Is getting extra XP in the mid to late game really that important? There may be other things that are more important in the short term, like having mana to cast spells in combat. Um, so yeah, I think we can move on to the next image here, which is talking about the wizard towers. You can have one of these in, you can only have one of these in your empire. It goes in your capital, and the first one just gives you +5 imperium. Everything down the middle path here gives you +5 imperium plus something. It looks like mostly just +2 vision range, and then the last one gives you +4 vision range, and the city gains true sight, which I think means you can see the camouflage or invisible units that are either within a domain or within the site of the city, which could reach outside of your technical domain. I'm not entirely sure. May go past one hex plus your vision range, so maybe 5 hexes outside of your domain if you get all the way up to Arcane Observatory. I'm assuming that that's how it works. It like replaces. Well, if it replaces, then you would expect the Imperium number to go up. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Um, but the other things here are pretty interesting. I like how the tower crypts and tower cells seem to be very similar in terms of their role, but they're more designed for how you're role playing. Like this is for what you do with heroes after you defeat them in battle. Are you gonna turn them into mana generating farms, or are you going to turn them into knowledge generating farms? If you have them in the prison, you get some knowledge out of them. If you have them in the crypts, you get some mana out of them. You can also resurrect them. I think that applies to your own heroes. So putting dead ones in the crypt uh, from your own side, that I think gives you mana. Taking them from the enemy side, I think that also gives you mana. But I think you can also just resurrect any old hero if you have the tower crypts. Whereas with the tower cells, they can be used to convert enemy heroes to your side or to execute them. I'm not sure what benefit executing them gives you. It might allow you to put them in the crypts, but I don't know why they wouldn't just go right to the crypts if you defeat them in battle. It could be for story reasons. Um, Room of Return lets your leader return faster from the void. I think it usually takes 3 or 2 turns to come back from the void, depending on if you are Wizard King or Immortal Champion. And being able to come back 1 turn faster is pretty big deal. If it takes you down from 2 turn to just 1 turn, you can just like wait to lose your leader at the end of your turn. And at the beginning of the turn, they're back again. Recall leader makes me feel like you can say, hey, I don't like where my leader ended up. They're about to get killed. I want to bring them back to my throne city. So just that unit would come back. The teleportation circle spell makes me feel like that's for an entire stack. It might take you back to the throne. It might be you can say, go from this hex to that hex. I would love that. I think that sounds really interesting and could really switch up the way people play. We didn't talk about casting points, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory. There's something in here about how you want to avoid going into negative stability. I think unless you are dark culture, I think dark cultures ignore those malices or downsides. Um, Let's see what else is in here. Building queues. So if you don't have something you want to build, it will either generate food or gold. I think draft, yeah, draft is turned into food and production is turned into gold inherently, but I believe you can try choose between a couple options. There's nothing in here about generating knowledge, so it may be that they can all generate knowledge, they can all generate food, they can all generate gold. It may be a little bit um, it may be that you could only have 2 options between draft and only 2 options between production. I haven't played around with this yet, so I don't really know. It's a bit of a mystery to me, but it sounds like it's a little bit versatile. One of the things in Planetfall that I always heard about production is you should never generate gold. You should never generate research. If you do that, you're kind of wasting that production. Getting only 25% of that as something else is just like wasting that 75% that you could have been sending towards a unit or building. But with the way they split up resources, it may be that you won't always have things you want to build towards that using this to generate just a little bit more food to get to the next pop, that could be worth it in the long run. I haven't played around with it, so we'll see more later. Um, what else can we say here? I think we're ready to move on to city domain. So yes, one important difference between Planetfall, Age of Wonders Planetfall, and Age of Wonders 4 is that the way your domain expands is going to happen a lot quicker. The provinces or sectors are smaller, and you get a new one every population. So if you have 15 pops, you can have 15 provinces attached to that city. That means these cities are going to get pretty big pretty fast, and it's gonna allow, I think, new players, like they said in here, if you're making the decision more often, I think that's going to teach people the difference between your decisions and really stress the importance between one thing versus another thing. Like what can you do when you get a bunch of mana nodes together? Well, you can generate a lot of mana probably. Or conduits or quarries, like they all allow you to go for a very specific priority, and then once you optimize towards it, it starts to get a little bit out of control. It's like the snowball effect. Um, so next we have the improvements themselves. It looks like they don't actually produce too much at the first level. Saying just like you get +5 food for farms, but the farms may provide something on top of it. This place where they're building a conduit is making +15 mana instead of just the 5 mana that it mentions right here because of the mana node. The mana node plus the conduit would take them up to 15 mana. And I believe that when you build quarries, you would build it on a place that would take you up to probably something like 15 production for this, like the first level of quarry. Um, Huts are an interesting one. They can go on places that are considered inhospitable, which could make sense if, say, there's a sector on the other side of it that you want to attach to your city, but otherwise you wouldn't be able to. Maybe somewhere in the frozen north, there's some ancient wonder that produces ogres or dragons or something really powerful that is worth attaching to your cities. So just sending one population on a hut to get there could be worth it. These guys produce 3 food instead of 5 food, and they don't count as farms, counting towards your economic development. I think huts in general probably don't feed into much, or if they do, it's very specific to a certain culture. I could see like the barbarian culture or like maybe the primeval culture that's going to come with one of the DLCs using huts to do something kind of fun and silly. But I don't think that there's any hints about that here, so that could just be me theory crafting. City structure boosts. So we did talk about this earlier. If you get the forester before you build the library, it takes its production down from 130 down to 91 production, the gold from 60 gold down to 42 gold, and it also takes the number of turns it takes down from 4 turns to 3 turns, and that's coming from the amount of production you make in the city compared to the production cost right there. Um, it's cool to finally see a little bit more about how all these things actually work, what you get out of them, and what boosted means. Because I did see the boosted thing on another screenshot. I wonder what does that mean. Um, There was something in here about city caps, I believe, and how you can actually increase them using influence. That's pretty neat. I like that uh, ability for people who want to have really big sprawling empires. This one's talking about this image right here mentions that you get a boost from having quarries, but you also need a conduit. So you don't need the boost to end up getting the monolith. Maybe it's better. Maybe you'll get it faster if you just go right for the monolith. But in order to do that, you need at least the conduit. So there are like actual requirements for some of these city structures, whereas most of them just have boosts that are will make it easier to make the structure inside the center of your city. Yeah, city structures go inside the city. Province things go outside. There's a pretty interesting one that would keep things from getting burned down. I think that's actually the sanctuary. Yeah, that's in this next section about the special province improvements. So this is coming from the different cultures. I think yeah, mob camp is no, that's coming from a tome. It's a building that lets you build units faster, gives you some draft, and it lets you deploy them from a different location. So you don't just have to deploy them on your city center. It looks like you can say this unit is built, I want it to show up here, which is something we haven't seen in I think Age of Wonders 3 or Age of Wonders Planetfall, and I'm interested to see how that's actually implemented because usually when it just finishes the production, it shows up in the center. Um, and I could see it saying, where do you want to place this versus uh, maybe you make that decision when you produce it. Maybe you're producing it in the mob camp or you're producing it in the city center. I haven't seen that UI actually implemented, or I haven't seen somebody navigating that menu. So that's something that I'd love to hear people's theories on. The fact that it makes tier 1 units 20% cheaper is not nothing, actually. That's probably one of the bigger parts of the mob camp. In general, tier 1 units don't take very long to build, but reducing that production by 20% means every time you were going to build 4 units, now you have a fifth unit. That's, yeah, means that you're going to be able to swarm better. Like the whole point of the Tome of the Horde is to amass those cheap units, so might as well go for it. I really like the Frostspire uh, building here. It seems pretty powerful. Visiting units will be able to get Ice Touch until the end of the next combat, giving them their physical attacks a base 30% chance of inflicting Frozen. I have to imagine that range physical count. So if you put a bunch of archers on this site, then they could just run forward and freeze enemies before they even get to them. And I guess repeating would probably allow you to apply that 30% chance on each of your repeating shots. I love the idea of putting this on all of my cities and just constantly running my armies over one before they go into any fight. Although that's probably not super optimal. You probably won't have these everywhere, maybe in your capital and a few other places. But having it close to where you're going to be engaging your enemies, your like enemy commanders, not just the neutrals that are on map, that seems pretty important to me. What else is there in here? I think we're getting pretty close to the end. Yeah, the capstones are the guilds. They're the tier 4s. You can only have one of them. Um, There's some different building structures for each of the different cultures. The bastion barricade we mentioned earlier. This is where you can get two bastions to help you in a fight, and those guys have the ability to give armor to everybody around them when they go into defensive mode. I think it's a pretty powerful way of just allowing your units to take more damage and therefore stay alive and deal more damage and hopefully win the fight as a result. That also reminds me a little bit of just a couple Oathbound mechanics where they're boosting each other with adjacency. It also provides extra fortification health, meaning that it'll take longer for the city to get sieged down. It's interesting. This says fortification health here, but the other image said siege health, and I think the siege health image was from earlier in development. This looks like something that was developed a long time before they got to the point of making uh, this screenshot here about um, the bastion barricade. So I think they probably switched over the terminology to fortification health at one point. Makes sense. I think fortification health and like it makes more sense to me that that's talking about a city than siege health. To me, siege health I thought was like talking about the catapults having more health at first. So yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense now. We have the workers farmstead and the grand mill here, which are also specific things for um, certain cultures. I think the workers thing is also industrious, and the grand mill, yeah, I think those are the two industrious options that you get instead of food production, and that allows you to build buildings just a little bit quicker. It makes sense for industrious people to be able to build things a little bit quicker instead of just like having more pops. I mean, having more pops will allow you to build things more quickly, but if you can get food another way, then having this production seems slightly better in longer games. After that, we have the Builder's Quarter, which they were showing off how you can stack off these benefits, the adjacency benefits, to make this a lot more than just plus 15 production. You can get up to plus 40 production for the Builder's Quarters if you place it next to quarries. I always like the adjacency benefits. It does make it so you have to plan out your cities a little bit more, but that is something that a lot of people enjoy, just basically playing SimCity. The industrial compound's pretty good. It requires, oh no, it gets extra stability every 15 pops, which seems to indicate you can get up to 30 or maybe 45 pops in a city. There's also a massive cost of production in gold here, 462, or at least it appears like a lot, and that may just eventually drop down. It may eventually feel like not a lot because you have thousands and thousands of gold, but for me, I rarely get over 1,000 gold in Age of Wonders Planetfall, so in general, it seems pretty good. You can get province annexed into your city from further away. I don't know what the base limit is, but it seems like, yeah, being able to reach further is generally a pretty good idea. You can probably get up to 3, maybe 4 provinces away from your city center, from your capital center. But yeah, until we know more, that's just a guess. I do like that if you go over the cap, it's minus 25% production, I think. And oh, this is talking about conversions being better. If you get this building, it goes up to from 25 to 35%. I thought I was talking about some other percentage. Yeah, this is the part that talks about you get minus 25 production on or income if you go over your cap, but you can get more pretty easily by focusing on that in the, I think, general development path for the empire. Um, so yeah, it does remind me of Stellaris, but the penalty I think is as harsh as it should be. I think it would be uh, it'd be a bit silly if it was only minus 10% because then you get more out of having more cities than the penalty, and then that's not a real limit. That's not a real cap, in my opinion. So I hope that that stays close to what we have right here. And the last thing that we can talk about is the vassalization system. I didn't see anything in here that I particularly wanted to highlight, but that may be because I didn't look that closely at the image here. The image does seem to have some pretty interesting information about allegiance and what you get from your vassals. This vassal is providing 58 mana, 120 gold, 43 knowledge, and it looks like there's some modifiers on that. There's a minus 60% supreme vassalage, so they're up at the highest level, which means that, or not minus, that's giving you plus 60% more of the from the base income that they generally would provide you, and you're gonna get plus 20 gold from them being, I think, tributary status. You could spend 450 imperium trying to integrate that city. That seems like a lot. I don't think I've seen anything that costs 450 imperium before. Um, the allegiance is up to 160, and I don't know if it can go past that. Something tells me that's like at the higher end. You may be able to get more points past the point that takes you to supreme vassalage, but it doesn't seem like it says 160 out of 160. That indicates that they're at a wall of any kind. Um, what else is there? These guys are stocky mystics. It looks like the vassal is a stocky mystic, and if you're a stocky mystic, they're more likely to like you. Or if they have similar affinities, I think they're more likely to like you. And based on this relationship, I think that's pretty likely that there's some synergy between the player nation and this nation. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. If you look at the top, they have 4,000 gold, almost 2,000 mana, and we know it's turn 84. So in general, I think that is pretty similar to other Age of Wonders games, but still some pretty big numbers. If there's anything you feel like I missed, I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are on this dev diary. In general, it was pretty exciting for me, and I can't wait to see more next week. It looks like we're going to be um, there's something special happening next week on Wednesday, so keep an eye out for that. I'll see you around. Have a good one.